Hi, my name's Duncan. I'm from Staffordshire Wildlife Trust. I'm here today to talk to you about some wildlife ponds. So we've got a typical wildlife pond built here at our Wolseley Centre headquarters. When you're thinking about building a wildlife pond, one thing you've got to take into consideration straight away is budget. Also space. So how big do you want the pond? Now, typically for a wildlife pond, you don't need anything huge. A wildlife pond is going to provide habitat. It's also going to provide water for local wildlife to drink. It's going to provide a focal point. It's also going to provide some extra colour in the spring and summer. So you don't need a huge space. This pond here is a small wildlife pond that was built several years back, and it's kind of a typical example of a wildlife pond. Some of the key features we've got here is it's got a gradual gradient just here. So for a wildlife pond, you don't necessarily want a steep edge because wildlife such as hedgehogs and various things can go and get a drink by the pond edge. If they fall in, they might not be able to get back out. It also provides easy access to things like newts, amphibians, frogs, toads and so on. So a nice gentle gradient here allows easy access into the pond. A wildlife pond as well, typically it's not super deep. We want sort of maximum sunlight to reach the pond. So a foot or two is usually fine for wildlife. I think this one, it's only about 18-inch deep, so it's got good sunlight penetration right down to the bottom. Some other good features that we've got here as well. It's hard to see at this time of year because we're in winter, but in the spring and summer, the vegetation will encroach right to this edge. So a large percentage of the pond edge has covering vegetation, which means that animals moving to and from the pond have got cover. They don't necessarily want to come out into open space. We've got some nice detailing here with the slabs as well, which has provided lots of nooks and crannies. These little places here are great for amphibians such as your newts, your frogs, your toads. They can secrete themselves away. It might even be a good hibernation site for them to overwinter. We've also got log piles down at the other end, which serve as the same purpose, but you've also got the added thing that there could be food sources under there, so there could be invertebrates. So any amphibians that are coming out of the pond can easily source food close to the pond. At the front of the pond, we've got a path, because you want to be able to access the path, you want to be able to see the path. But for a wildlife pond, we don't necessarily want human access all the way around, because it creates a barrier for wildlife moving to and from the pond. This pond is lined, so a liner is a big factor in your pond budget. So we would always say go for a more expensive liner, because a more expensive liner is going to last longer, it's going to have better UV protection, and it's going to be more resilient and resistant to punctures, to tears and so on. This pond in particular has been lined so that we've got no liner sticking out. You don't necessarily want liner coming up out of the pond. You can cover it over with substrate, but again, it's exposing it to UV from the sun, which can degrade the liner, and it's also exposing it to punctures. So ideally, you don't want too much of the liner showing at the edge of a pond.